Kenneth Povey and his wife are accused of the murder of Charles Oldbury at the Pines Residential Hotel run by them, and also of conspiring with Leonard Saxton, solicitor's clerk, to obtain fraudulently the sum of £30,000 from his estate. Yesterday, defence counsel Miss Helen Tate caused a sensation in court when she suggested that Dr. Leslie Fulmer, the medical practitioner who attended Mr. Charles Oldbury, might have been responsible for his death. Mr. Justice Mitchenor is addressing the jury.
Members of the jury, I would ask you to disregard the imputation brought forth yesterday by defence counsel that Dr. Fulmer was irresponsible in her treatment of the deceased Charles Oldbury. Other medical evidence will be introduced at a later point in this trial. Until then, I would like you to keep an open mind as regards Dr. Fulmer's treatment and the allegation of improper treatment. Please call your next witness.
Detective Inspector McGovern, please.
Ian McGovern, Detective Inspector, Fulchester City Police Force.
Please tell the court what you know of these events, Inspector.
I was on duty at City Centre Police Station on the morning of Saturday, December the 1st, where I saw Mr. Leonard Saxton and interviewed him in the presence of Mr. John Osprey. Later that day, I called at the Pines Hotel, where I saw the defendants. I told them I was investigating an alleged fraud against the late Charles Oldbury and had reason to believe they could assist me with my inquiries. I asked them to accompany me to the police station.
And did they do so?
No, sir, they were not willing to do that. I thereupon left the Pines Hotel to continue my inquiries, and I returned to the Pines Hotel later that day. I saw Mr. Povey. I cautioned him, I arrested him, and escorted him to the City Centre Police Station. In the light of subsequent inquiries, Kenneth Povey was later charged also, jointly with his wife, for the murder of Charles Oldbury.
Yes. Now, did you at some stage examine the plumbing at the Pines Hotel?
Yes, sir, I did. With two other officers, we carried out some experiments involving the hot and cold water supply to the kitchen and bathroom. When we ran hot water into the bath to a reasonable depth, we found that the immediate effect was to reduce the supply to the kitchen tap.
You mean as you were running the water?
Oh, that happened also, but that was not, in my view, an important matter. Mm-hmm. Certainly the bore of the pipes was too narrow to allow the kitchen tap and the bathroom tap to be run simultaneously, but in addition, the capacity of the hot water cylinder was inadequate. It had been a private residence and had been replumbed to its present needs.
Yes. Now, what practical effect does this have on the hot water supply?
After a bath of water had been drawn off?
Yes.
There was a period of 35 minutes till the water heated to the setting on the thermostat.
35 minutes, I see. Well, now, let us turn our attention to the financial affairs of the accused. My lord, I should like to introduce at this stage as evidence of the defendant's financial position the accounts for their partnership over the last 2 years.
No objection, my lord.
Where were these accounts, Inspector?
They were hidden under a pile of old newspapers in a cupboard.
Are you sure that they were hidden?
Well, it was the most unusual place to find it, my lord.
Yeah.
I shall be referring to these accounts in detail later, my lord. Thank you.
Inspector McGovern, when you requested Mr. and Mrs. Povey to accompany you to the police station and they refused, how did they couch their refusal?
They said they couldn't. They hadn't the stuff available.
To look after the old people in their absence?
Yes.
Well, you did not consider that unreasonable in the circumstances?
No.
It would not be correct, therefore, to read any adverse interpretation into their refusal.
You wish to re-examine, Mr. Golding?
No,
Thank you, Mr. McGovern.
I call Maria Novati.
Maria Novati, please. Take the Bible in your right hand and read aloud the words on the card.
Sorry, I do not...
You understand English, Miss Novati?
Oh, yes, sir.
You know what it means to take an oath in a court of law?
I must tell all of the truth, sir.
Good. I don't really mind, but try calling me my lord.
Oh, yes, sir.
My lord.
My lord.
Take the Bible and read aloud the words.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
You are Maria Novati, and you are employed as a domestic servant at the Pines Hotel.
Yes.
Could you tell us what your duties are, Maria?
Oh, they are everything. Oh, the beds and the cleaning of the rooms, and in the night I help with the serving of the dinner.
Didn't you tell the police you also do things in the kitchen?
I forget the dishes. How could I forget washing the dishes?
It's all right,
The
Miss
plates and the pans every day. How I forget that?
Yes. Now, did you wash up the night Mr. Oldbury died?
Of course, always.
But can you remember that night in particular?
Well, he always have his bath early and use all of the hot water. Many time I complain, but he always do it.
Every day did he always do it?
Oh, no, he have bath every other day. When he have bath, I put on pan of water to get hot.
On the stove?
That is right, for the pans and the dishes.
Now, what about the night Mr. Oldbury died, then?
Well, he got to have his bath, but the pan of water, it is not needed.
Well, why is that?
But the water in the tap, it is hot all of the time. The pan, it is not needed.
The water in the tap, it is hot all the time. I see. Now, had this happened before when someone ran a bath?
No, when the bath water is run, always there is no hot water.
Well, then Mr. Oldbury didn't have a bath.
Oh, yes. He go upstairs to the bathroom. I hear water running.
Well, then how do you explain that, Maria?
It must have been the cold water running.
My lord, I object most strongly.
Yes, that is only the witness's inference. It is for you yourselves to decide whether the water that she heard running was hot or cold. Please phrase your question more carefully.
I beg your lordship's pardon. Miss Navati, can you tell us what terms Mr. Oldbury was on with Mr. and Mrs. Povey?
He didn't like them.
My lord.
Yes. That is your opinion, Miss Navati? That the deceased didn't like them?
He told me. He used to say Mr. Povey, he would sell his own grandmother.
Oh, yes.
Now, one last question, Maria. Did you at any time that evening hear anyone cry out for help?
No.
Thank you.
Wait a minute. This lady may have some questions for you.
Thank you, my lord. Now, Miss Navati, we've heard that it takes over half an hour for the water to heat up again.
Did I say that?
No, you didn't. It was said by someone before you came in. But, is it true, by the way?
See, I would say. It is a long time.
Well, perhaps it was that amount of time between the running of the water and your washing the pans and dishes.
No, I hear the running of the bath water. And after 4-5 minutes, the water, it is still hot. In the tap, I felt it.
Are you sure it was hot and not just warm?
No, it was hot. There was no use for the water in the pan.
The point is important. It tells us something about the time, you see.
Yes, what counsel is saying to you is that if the water in the kitchen tap was truly hot when you felt it, then the bath must have been run more than half an hour before. Or, as you said, it couldn't have been the hot water that you heard running.
With my hand, I felt the water. It was very hot. It was scalding.
Now, you come from Italy, don't you?
Yes, I come from
Yes, and where
Naples.
you used to live, it was sometimes cold.
Yes, in the
When
winter
you
it
came
is very
from
hot.
outside with your hands cold and you put them into warm water, did it not seem hot?
Yes, but my hands, they were not cold. In the kitchen it was warm.
I'm very much obliged, my lord.
Mr.
No further
Golding?
questions for this witness.
Mr. Golding?
No, my lord, thank you.
Now you may go, Miss Navati. You can sit over there.
I call Peter Oldbury.
Peter Oldbury, please.
Peter Oldbury, what was your relationship to the late Charles Oldbury?
His nephew.
And what other immediate family had he?
Just his 2 married daughters.
Any grandchildren?
No,
So you 3 are his sole family.
that is so.
How close were you?
His daughters saw more of him than I did.
But you did see him.
Oh, yes, sometimes he would stay for a couple of days. Other times I'd go and see him.
So that you could say your relationship was a good one.
Oh, indeed, yes, certainly. Yes.
Now, were you aware he'd left you money in his will?
Yes, he told me he had.
When did he tell you?
6 years ago when Aunt Tessa died, his wife died. He had left everything to her, but after she died, he made out a new will.
Now, was it ever spoken of again?
I don't remember it ever coming up.
Would you please look at your uncle's will? You will see the 3 bequests contained in it. Now, there are 2 female legatees named there, your cousins, the daughters of the deceased.
Yes, they are.
Yes. You and his daughters were to benefit in equal proportion.
Yes. Uncle Charles really thought of me more as one of his own children.
You would therefore be considerably surprised to discover that you've been disinherited.
Well, yes, I would.
Yes. Now, was there any occasion when harsh words passed between you?
No, not that I can recall.
Was your uncle happy at the Pines?
I think so. He was quite an independent old sort of chap. He liked leading his own life. He wouldn't have been happy. He wouldn't have been happy making a home with me or with his daughters.
No, not because of ill feeling.
Oh no, certainly not.
Now, was there any aspect of his life at the Pines about which he expressed concern?
I'm sorry. I'm not quite...
Yes, I think counsel is trying not to lead you. Let me put it this way. Had your uncle made any particular friend amongst the other residents or staff at the hotel that might have affected the disposition of his estate?
He liked several of the other residents, but I'm sure he reckoned to outlive them.
Yes, and the staff?
He might have thought to leave a keepsake. He liked Maria Navati.
Yes. And the proprietors?
Oh, no, definitely not.
Why do you speak with such certainty?
Simply he didn't have much time for them.
You deduced this?
No. He often used to speak of them in a derogatory manner.
Thank you, my lord. I have nothing more for this witness.
I have to say, Mr. Oldbury, that my information is somewhat at variance with your testimony. You were asked if harsh words ever passed between you and your uncle. If you ever had a row, in other words.
We didn't.
Well, that's at least more positive than the answer you gave to my learned friend. Then you said, none that I can recall, didn't you?
Well,
did you visit your uncle last October?
I may have.
Well, I can tell you that you did. Tea for two was taken up to his room by Mrs. Povey. I'm sure you'll recall, about the second week in October.
Yes, I remember.
Splendid. And do you also remember that your uncle angrily accused you of giving him erroneous information?
That? It was purely momentary. I mean, his anger quickly passed.
I see. Well, would you like to tell us about it?
He had some money available, and I told him about some property he might put it in.
Are you an investment consultant then, Mr. Oldbury?
I'm an estate agent, as I'm sure you're perfectly well aware.
Yes. Just answer the questions, will you? And just when did you proffer this advice?
Some months previously, I can't quite remember.
And he'd taken it and acted on it, had he?
Yes. The situation didn't turn out as I anticipated, and he lost some money on it.
How much?
About £1,500.
And you say his anger was purely momentary? I hardly feel most people's response would be as ephemeral in the circumstances.
He was a very generous and kindly man. His anger was quickly over, and he apologized for it.
I suggest his reaction was a little less forgiving than you would have us believe.
Are you suggesting that this witness has intended deliberately to deceive the court?
No, my lord, but I am not accepting his evidence in chief without qualification. And more importantly, that Charles Oldbury may have had a reason for altering his will.
Oh, yes. Let's get on.
I have no further questions for this witness, my lord.
Mr. Golding?
One point, my lord. Mr. Oldbury, you said earlier that your uncle was in the habit of staying with you for a couple of days.
Yes, he was.
Yes. Now, did he by any chance come and visit you after you'd had those few words in his room that day?
He stayed with us for the weekend.
He stayed at your house?
Yes. But first week in November.
Were any more words exchanged?
But heavens, no. It was all very relaxed. I mean, he enjoyed being with us, and we enjoyed having him.
Thank you, Mr. Oldbury.
You may stand down, Mr. Oldbury.
Call Dr. Stanhope, please.
Dr. Stanhope, please.
Dr. Stanhope, did you carry out a post-mortem examination on the body of Charles Oldbury in November last year?
I did.
Will you please tell the court your findings?
I formed the opinion that death was from cardiac arrest. Heart failure, my lord.
Would you have expected that from his general physical condition?
I found no significant evidence of cardiovascular disease. For a man of his age, he was in good condition.
Then what, in your view, could have brought it about?
An analysis of tissue samples points to an extremely low body temperature at the time of death, possibly less than 25 degrees centigrade. Without proper treatment, the heart would beat increasingly slowly and would eventually stop.
Thank you. You've been most helpful, Doctor.
Do you wish to cross-examine, Mr.
Thank you, my lord, yes. I would ask your indulgence, Doctor, if my questions seem excessively naive. Now, this very low body temperature that you speak of, hypothermia, isn't it?
Yes, that is its name.
And yet you referred to...
cardiac arrest.
Exactly so.
The hypothermia would be a predisposing condition.
Ah, understood. Now, and you must forgive me if this is foolish, is there not a condition known as fibrillation which could lead to heart stoppage?
There is, and it could.
What is this condition, please, Doctor?
Fibrillation, my lord, is the uncoordinated, irregular activity of the muscle fibres of the heart.
One takes to be serious.
Without the immediate use of electric shock equipment, my lord, it could lead to death.
Now, obviously, you examined the body carefully for marks of injuries.
I'm so sorry. Is that a question?
It was.
Well, of course I examined the body for marks of injury. There were none, apart from what one would expect from resuscitation techniques.
And what were those?
Rib fractures over the heart.
Good heavens.
It is to be expected with external cardiac massage, especially where the patient is elderly.
I see. But apart from these therapeutic injuries, there were no other marks, no scratches as if the deceased had been forcibly restrained from getting out of the bath?
I found none.
No marks of any kind, however insignificant or superficial?
Oh, only skin discoloration.
Where?
On the chest.
And what did you assume it to be?
I took it to be a pressure mark from the heart massage.
A pressure mark?
Bruising.
Bruising. Thank you, Dr. Stanhope. Thank you very much indeed.
The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. George Andrew McIver, Professor of Medicine at the University Hospital of Fulchester.
Now, I think you're familiar with the medical findings in this case, Professor.
I have studied the deposition of Dr. Fulmer and the pathological notes of Dr. Stanhope.
Good. Now, I believe you're especially interested in the problems of human survival in sub-zero temperatures and have, in fact, acted as advisor on various government-sponsored visits to the Antarctic.
That is correct.
Now, with this background, the condition and treatment of hypothermia must be very familiar to you.
It is.
Would you be so kind as to explain its effects to us?
The normal body temperature is 25 degrees centigrade. When the body falls to about 33 degrees, there will be loss of consciousness. Below 27 degrees, the respiration and heart rate will become virtually undetectable. At this stage, the borderline between life and death becomes ill-defined.
Would you say that this was a condition similar to that of drowning?
Well, of course, it's an entirely different thing. But having said that, there are circumstances in which it would be extremely difficult to distinguish between the two.
Would the same treatment be appropriate to both cases?
Emphatically not.
Now, have there not been some very recent studies in this field?
There have indeed. As recently as October 1973, studies of hypothermia treatment were reported in the Proceedings of the Royal Society of Medicine.
You see, I do want to be fair about this. Dr. Fulmer is not on trial here today, but we do have to establish the probabilities of the situation. Now, would you say that normal resuscitation techniques, as for drowning, have sometimes been applied to cases of hypothermia?
No doubt of it.
And could this bring about the death of the victim?
Perfectly possible.
But these hazards of treatment, until recently, have been imperfectly understood by the majority of medical practitioners. Now, I ask this in order to be fair.
Your constant anxiety to be fair to Dr. Fulmer does you credit, Miss Tate.
Yes, this area of research has become particularly relevant because of the recent upsurge in boating and the resultant increase in accidents at sea.
The activity where you might expect to encounter both conditions.
Yes, indeed.
And it is hard to tell the difference.
It can be. And since time is not on one side in either case, it often is.
What would a trained observer look for in hypothermia?
Well, as I said, the heart rate and respiration would be imperceptible. The pupils widely dilated, the body temperature, the body particularly cold to the touch. To some extent, one would judge by the circumstances in which the victim was found. Obviously, if it were known that the person had not been long in the water, one would infer drowning rather than hypothermia.
Now, given the circumstances in which Charles Oldbury was found, would you have applied immediate artificial respiration?
My lord, I object.
Yes, one moment, Miss Tate. Professor, what would be your first action on being called upon to attend a patient whose circumstances and condition was so ambiguous, in fact, that you couldn't tell whether it was hypothermia or drowning?
Well, if the body were remarkably cold in the given circumstances, I think I should presume hypothermia and restore the patient to a viable temperature.
Before doing anything else?
Yes.
How would you restore temperature?
A hot bath.
Wouldn't that cause shock?
No. Water, say, of 44 to 46 degrees centigrade. It would be unwise to attempt any other therapy until the body was sufficiently rewarmed.
What could happen?
Well, below 25 degrees, the heartbeat would be so minimal that excessive stimulation might induce ventricular fibrillation. Without proper equipment, this would be irreversible.
Would you be so kind as to take us through Dr. Fulmer's deposition?
Mm-hmm. Well, having made her assessment, she commenced mouth-to-mouth ventilation and external cardiac massage. During this, she carried out auscultation to determine progress and reveal the extent of fluid in the lungs.
Now, that is presumably conventional treatment on the basis that the patient has drowned.
Oh, yes.
Then what would be the likely effect of this treatment had Mr. Ulbright been suffering from hypothermia?
Well, I have indicated it could be dangerous.
Because he was too cold?
Exactly.
And he may die?
Unless dead already.
But we know he wasn't dead, Professor. The pathologist has told us that there were fractured ribs over the heart.
Well, it's not uncommon in cardiac massage. Considerable force is involved.
So we understand. He also told us that there was a bruise on Mr. Ulbricht's chest. Now, what could that be?
A thump with a clenched fist over the heart is one of the first things one would do to restart it.
What is a bruise, Professor McIver?
Well, it's skin discoloration.
Yes, that's exactly what Dr. Stanhope said. But what causes this discoloration?
Hemorrhaging of small blood vessels.
Bleeding?
Yes.
After death?
No.
Are you saying that absolutely no mark would appear after death?
Well, any substantial bruising could not occur, but if circulation was induced by cardiac massage, then a little bleeding could occur.
And could Mr. Ulbricht's bruising be considered substantial?
Well, a hammer blow with a clenched fist.
The pathologist found discoloration.
Technically correct.
Yes, Mr. Golding, in your examination-in-chief of Dr. Stanhope, the degree of bruising was not established.
No, it was not brought out at all, my lord. It was referred to only in the cross-examination of my learned friend.
Yes, so it was. I think this point should be looked at.
Very well, my lord.
Miss Tate?
I agree, my lord.
Yes. Ask Dr. Stanhope to come up now, please. Professor, would you mind standing aside for 1 minute?
You are still on oath, Dr. Stanhope.
Yes.
Doctor, you will have heard the opinions expressed by the last witness, and obviously you will appreciate the significance of the bruising as a pointer to time of death.
Yes, my lord.
Can you be more precise about the nature of the bruising over the heart?
It was substantial, consistent with a blow to restart the heart.
Of an intensity not to be expected if the blow had been struck after death?
That would be my opinion, my lord.
Thank you, Dr. Stanhope.
I've no further questions for Professor McIver, my lord.
Do you wish to cross-examine the professor?
Yes, my lord. Yes. Professor, I have just one point that I wish to make very clearly. This condition of fibrillation we have heard so much about, it is only a possible outcome of Dr. Fulmer's treatment, is it not?
I would rate the possibility fairly high.
I see. Nevertheless, it must remain conjectural. Thank you, Professor.
Yes,
No further
Professor.
questions, my lord.
I take it that the absence of fluid in the lungs, established by Dr. Fulmer's evidence and the autopsy report, does dismiss drowning.
Yes, my lord.
Thank you, Professor. You may go, Miss Tate.
I call Margaret Ellen Povey, my lord. You are Margaret Ellen Povey, and you are proprietor of the Pines Residential Hotel, Fulchester.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know Leonard Saxton?
Yes.
How well do you know him?
He was my lover.
The case of the Queen against Povey and Povey will be resumed tomorrow in the Crown Court.